Hello, Namaskar and Adab to all my friends. From your friend astrologer and guide Irfan, once more with you from your very own channel Astro Assurance. When we talk about placements, when we talk about results, when we talk about situations in our lives, we also look at beyond the generic view of the horoscope, and we also look at certain placements from each other, the Bhavad Bhavam principle. In that light, one of the principles which works very actively and which works very robustly, and generally it shows at strongest of its results, is the placements of the 8th house from any planet. Say for example, if you have, according to Bhavad Bhavam principle, 4th from moon will give you good results in terms of making assets connected to the moon or connected to the house that the moon is in. If you have a planet, for example, 2nd from sun, then it will also give you a good placement of earnings from that placement of the sun or the 2nd house from the sun. If you take more responsibility about it, you take more accountability about it, and how you manifest, how you carry yourself, and how you are able to take responsibility for the actions of that house. So the 8th house from any planet gives what? Gives what the 8th house represents, gives obstructions to the particular manifestations or the results of that house, but it also gives you certain secrets, also gives you certain unsaid things, and also those things which you need to explore. And if you are not able to explore them, if you are not able to face the obstruction, the challenges of that particular house, then you may not be able to manifest the results of the planet itself very well, because the biggest problem, the biggest obstacle, the biggest obstruction to a planet is coming from the 8th house from where the planet is placed. And so it's important for us to also understand our horoscopes from what are the 8th placements from each of the planets, what kind of obstruction they are giving to the respective planet, and how it has manifested itself in our lives, and what we have been able to face, and whether we have been able to delve into it, try to explore that area, try to see what obstruction is coming, be able to comprehend it, and maybe able to overcome that area also, so that we get better results. Sometimes that house itself may throw up opportunities as well, and opportunities and gains as well. So what I want to do is pick out the chart of somebody whose life is not hidden. Almost every aspect of his life is known to us through many of his own letters, many of his own volition, many of his own coming out and sharing with people, and somebody who we know as who spoke the truth always, and also the father of the nation of the biggest democracy in the world, which is India. I am talking about none other than Mahatma Gandhi, or Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. I want to delve into his horoscope and look at, from all his planetary placements, the 8th house, and how through various events, through various situations, what obstructions have come by to Mahatma Gandhi because of them, what secretive areas he has delved in, he has explored those areas, and where are some of the fallacies and also challenges and even downfalls which came to him, or where there were question marks raised to his character itself, to his personality itself, basis where his 8th house manifestation fell, and how he handled and he tackled those areas. So let's jump into the horoscope of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, or Bapu, or Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation, and one of the most revered politicians, one of the most revered thinkers, one of the most revered leaders of the 20th century. So let's begin with the analysis, 8th from each of the planetary placements of Mahatma Gandhi. Now when you look at Mahatma Gandhi's horoscope, we know that he was born on the 2nd of October 1869 in the city or the small town of Porbandar in Gujarat. Now in his horoscope, he is of the Libra Lagna, and he has Mars, Venus and Mercury in the Lagna itself. Saturn is in the sign of Scorpio in the 2nd house. Sun is in the 12th house in the sign of Virgo. Rahu and Moon are in an eclipse position to the Moon in Cancer sign in the 10th house. Jupiter is in Aries sign in the 7th house. Ketu is in the 4th house in Capricorn. So these are his generic placements. And Moon is in the nakshatra of Aslesha, ruled by Mercury, and hence if you see his entire life was about certain important decisions that he had to make basis his own intellect, basis his own understanding, basis his own analysis of situations. So let's jump into the 8th placement from each of the planets and what challenges he faced, what situations he faced on each one of them. Let's look at the Lagna and start with Mars. Now the 8th house from Mars is the Taurus sign. Now from Mars perspective, what was the biggest fight that he had? The biggest fight or battle according to him was fighting his own sexuality, because in one incident he narrates in his own book, in his autobiography, that while his father was on deathbed, he was having lustful thoughts about his wife, and in fact while his father was on deathbed, he in fact went ahead and he had a sexual intercourse with his wife, and which he had a lot of remorse for later on. So his own sexual energies, his old sexual manifestations, his fantasies, he always had a fight or his struggle where it came to his sexuality. And even later on, and in fact he thought of practicing celibacy in his 30th year itself, and he also spoke to his wife Kasturba and he tried to practice celibacy, in fact indulging in certain experiments which I will talk about later in through this video also, and which also is seen by many as his biggest shortfall and his biggest fallacy. So his biggest struggle came versus his sexual fantasies, his sexual urges, his sexual energies. Now the second planet in the Lagna is Venus, the Lagna lord itself. Now 8th house to Venus is Venus's own sign of Taurus, and hence many times Gandhiji also had a challenge with respect to money making. He didn't make much money, and many times he was not even able to ask for money from his clients when he was a barrister, when he was a lawyer. So one of the biggest obstructions or obstacles to his life also came from money, and also about how he treated women. In one of his experiments later on in his life, in his desire to keep away from desires and to practice celibacy, in his later years, older years, according to his admission, he used to sleep with women who were much younger to his age, and in fact the women used to be unclothed while in his bed, and he did that because he felt that he had to fight the sexual urges. And the biggest fight for him, the biggest struggle for him were women who were much beautiful, much younger to his age. And this also became one of the biggest obstructions to how he was seen, because here Venus is the Lagna lord, and many of his own colleagues, including Jawaharlal Nehru, who later on became the first Prime Minister of India, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who became the first Home Minister of India and was also is also credited for unifying many of Indian states, independent states, they all asked him to stop that because they said it is a blunder. So the biggest question mark to his Lagna, to his respect, came from that. And he is, even today in India, there are questions raised about this particular action, and there are questions raised in the manner of his leadership and this particular action, which in the earlier years this wasn't talked about much, and even Sir Richard Attenborough, who made a movie on Gandhi, kept away from this particular aspect of his life. The third struggle for him was from Mercury, and this struggle was in terms of his logical decision making. For example, supporting the British in the First World War and not opposing the recruitment of Indian soldiers to fight on the side of the British is seen as a fallacy, as a wrong decision making, as something which he blundered with. Later on, supporting the Muslim League in the support to the Khilafat movement, which was seen as a support to the Caliphate, is also seen as something which he blundered with, and it was a wrong decision. Third, during the height of the Quit India movement in 1942, because of riots, he called off the civil disobedience movement, and that was seen as a big blunder. And that was seen as a big blunder at the height of the civil disobedience movement in 1942, and he was pulled up by all the Indian leaders of the Indian Congress at that point of time as a big strategic blunder that he was doing, because he pushed back India's freedom struggle, or India attaining freedom, by many years. And then we look at Sun in the 12th house. What is the 8th house from the Sun? The 8th house from the Sun is the 7th house. Now what is the Sun? Sun is your self-respect, Sun is your pride, Sun is also how the world sees you, your respect. And because the 8th house from the Sun is the 7th house, and hence this particular action of his, where he used to sleep with naked women, unclothed women who were much younger than him in his years, in age, that surely put a question mark and a blot on how the world saw him, how the world leaders saw him. Gandhi had to contend with in his life itself, when many leaders pulled him up for this action, and in all the books which were written about him later on also, this particular action of Gandhi surely put a question mark on his respect, on his prestige and his standing, how world leaders saw him. Then when we look at Saturn, Saturn is in the 2nd house. Now which is the 8th house to Saturn? The 8th house is the 9th house, and hence in his very early years he found himself distanced from his father. His father was the Diwan of Rajkot, while Gandhi was in Porbandar, and Gandhi joined his father many years later in Rajkot. And then within a few years his father died. Gandhiji was still a teenager when he lost his father, and so Saturn being placed in the house of family, and the 8th from Saturn being the 9th house of father, he found himself distanced from father and not getting fatherly love and father's company. This is another manifestation that he found a lot of challenge from his gurus and his teachers also, because he also talks about his struggle where his teacher asked him to lie during his school days, when an inspector came to the school and asked a question and Gandhi was not able to answer. Even when prompted, he did not lie, and he said this was something he couldn't do. Then when you look at Rahu's placement in the 10th house, the 8th house from Rahu is the 5th house, and upheavals in careers, constant change in his careers, and this is something that he had to face. He was not a good barrister, he was not a good lawyer by his own admission. He did a bad job of his first case, and he struggled with his law practice, especially when he was in South Africa, and which is also denoted by Rahu in the 10th house, and so he was not able to contend with his own limitations in his career, his own challenges in his career, and not being able to do well in a foreign land in practicing law. And then he had to face a constant change of his freedom struggles also, and with a foreign land and with a foreign competitor, which was the British. And so his first struggle started in South Africa, then his second struggle came at Champaran, and then he eventually led various struggles of various kinds, including the Salt March, the Dandi March, against a foreign nation. And because he took up the cause of taking on a foreign power, his own career did not flourish. His own career didn't do well, because he was now championing the cause of a nation and the aspirations of a nation. Then when you look at the moon in the 10th house, the 8th house from the moon is the 5th house. The 5th house is also the house of children, and he found himself distanced from his children as well. Many of his children came out later on and talked about how they never felt loved by their father, which is Mahatma Gandhi. They felt distanced from their father, and their father was never available for them. There was also books written on it. There was also a movie made on one of his sons and his challenges with his father, and how his father was never there for his children, and in fact there was some animosity between Gandhi and his children as well. So his biggest obstruction, the biggest challenge, the biggest failing of Gandhi also came in the manner of his children. Then when we look at Jupiter, the 8th house from Jupiter is the 2nd house of family. So in his poor judgment, in his not being able to exercise his wisdom well with relation to his family, and hence his distance from his wife at a pretty young age, practicing celibacy, not being able to give or support his wife with Western medicine even when she was ill and she was about to die. So this was a challenge to his judgment in wisdom. This was an obstruction to his using his wisdom well in the manner of his family. And the next and the last but not the least, Ketu. First of all, Ketu's placement in the 4th house of domestic life, which he had very less of, because he never had a proper home. He was always on the move, and even in his ashram in Sabarmati, he didn't have an established domestic life with his wife Kasturba Gandhi. And when you look at the 8th house, and when you look at the 8th house from Ketu, the 8th house from Ketu is the 11th house, which is also a Kama Bhava. But the biggest challenge to this is Ketu is a planet of negation, and it negated him. Ketu is a planet of negation, but Ketu is also something which keeps you away from or obstructs the 8th house from it. So in this manner, Gandhiji never sought popularity. The popularity that came to him was more because of a very, very strong Lagna with Mars, Venus and Mercury placed here, and strong Rahu and Moon in his 10th house. However, he never sought popularity, he never sought fame, and so he was very open and he was very truthful, even at the cost of being seen as a man full of fallacies, full of contradictions. He never lied to people that he had challenges with respect to his sexuality. He had challenges with respect to not being able to win cases earlier, not being able to establish his career well, his profession well, and he talked openly about his experiments or his challenges with truth, his challenges with colleagues, his challenges with relationships, and his challenges with other leaders of the freedom struggle. So even at the cost of coming out as somebody who did not, and even at the cost of coming out as somebody who did not conform to the standards of morality according to Indian culture, he went ahead and spoke the truth. He did his experiments concerned with his sexuality without thinking of the pushback that may come from him at a national level. Second, he also pursued the cause of the untouchables or the Shudra community, or Harijans as he would call them, even at the time when the caste system was strongly ingrained in the Indian culture. So friends, when you look at Mahatma Gandhi's life, we saw how the 8th placement from all of his planets gave him some struggle, some obstruction, some secrets in his life also, many of which he was later on open to discussing them about. He was open to discussing about them, and he did not want to hide it, though initially he had challenges and issues. And he led a life where, though he championed the cause of India's freedom struggle and he became a Mahatma, he gave his life for the freedom struggle, yet there were various areas of his life where he had a big shortfall in his relation to his father, in his relation to his wife, spouse, in his relation to his children, in terms of how he dealt with other leaders of the political leadership of India's freedom struggle, in his relationship with women who stayed in his ashrama, in Sabarmati ashrama, with his, in fact in his own grandniece, his challenges with his profession, with his career, where he was not able to win any case of significance, and then when he had to be put in jail many years, which also stopped him from many of the areas of his life which he couldn't do justice to, including in his domestic life, including being a father, also including being a good colleague to the other leaders in the freedom struggle. So friends, look into your own horoscope, look 8th house from each of your planetary placements and see what are the obstructions, what are the challenges, what are the secrets which you may be keeping away, or you have not explored those areas yet, but which are there for you to explore. Maybe there is an opportunity there for you to overcome. There is a challenge for you to be able to overcome, or you are not able to see the obstructions, or you have been fighting those obstructions for many years and not been able to have an upper hand over them. So look into your horoscopes, understand the 8th placements from different planets, and then be able to understand your overall horoscope analysis, overall manifestation of the horoscope in the light of the 8th house from each planetary placement. So friends, like this video, share this video, and if you're looking for a personal consultation from me, please reach out to me at the links given below. Till some other time with some other video, this is your friend astrologer and guide Irfan signing off. Ciao.